Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this online lecture for MN204 that's going to cover all the content from week 5. So if you're in Group A and you've already got the Tuesday lecture, this is going to be a recap for you. If you're in Group B and you have all your lectures on a Wednesday, we're going to cover the entire 2 hours, hopefully in a little bit less than 2 hours, because things are generally go faster when we're on our own than when we have a group of people asking questions and whatever. So this is important content. Some of it can be on the MCQ. They're already printed, so there's absolutely nothing I can do about it. So what we're interested in today is we're going to talk about knowledge. We're going to talk about open innovation. We're going to talk about storing data and whatever. So this is really important stuff. We're interested in data and how we convert it into something useful. So just a quick reminder that assignment groups are there. It's on Moodle, on the Moodle page. Go down, scroll down to the bottom, you get information about it. I've also added some MCQ sample questions just to give people a little bit of steer with the research. So for the group assignment, you have an emerging technology from the hype cycle in an industry. You need to understand what that technology is and how it applies to what the implications are for the industry. So you might need to briefly describe the industry, but the focus is on the application of the technology. I don't want to hear, 100 years of the automobile industry if you're looking at, autonomous vehicle technology, just what the salient points that are relevant. So really focus on what the implications for the industry are. You need some basis for your assertions, so, don't come out with some broad sweeping statement about, how it's going to transform the industry without actually some facts to back that up. And really what we're interested in, really good assignments will have, will identify big challenges or opportunities. So, if you've kind of come to the conclusion that it's going to have no effect on the industry whatsoever, it's a little bit dull. And if that's what your research is showing, drop me an email and I'll just have a chat with you about it. Because these are going to be groundbreaking technologies. And what you need to do is you need to kind of, blue skies thinking is a bit of a cliche, but you need to use a kind of a blue ocean idea where you actually, think creatively, so it mightn't necessarily be 100% practical yet, but like look for ways that it can really change an industry. So it's an A0 poster saved as a PDF. So you say, well, why is it A0? That gives you an idea of the sort of font. The appearance of a poster is important. It should be a nice mix of text and images. Your print should be big enough so somebody can read it from a couple of feet away. It's not an essay that's just copied onto a poster. So it's a good idea is if you look around the library and places, you'll see research posters and get an idea of what they should look like. I've actually put a template poster up on Moodle as well. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is the difference between data, information, knowledge, and this is a famous Brian O'Driscoll quote, even though it's not Brian who came up with it first. And he lost a bet with Gordon Darcy when they were playing rugby for Ireland, and he had to shoehorn this quote into a press conference and make it sound like it was credible, and it was just for a bet. But basically, what it's saying is, knowledge is knowing the tomato is a fruit, wisdom is not putting it in a fruit salad. So it's all very well knowing some piece of information, but knowing what to do with it is where the true value comes from. So quick recap on what we did last week. We talked about, software, hardware, and the cloud. So you know what a computer is. It turns human language into machine code. We talked about system software, operating systems, utility programs. We talked about application software and the licensing models. And we talked about different platforms for the cloud. So platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, software as a service. So, these recap slides are important because they give you the kind of topics that will come up. As I said before, the software, hardware, cloud lecture is good for MCQs. I don't envisage there being an exam question out of that topic, but it is important information for you to be aware of. So we're interested in data, and data comes everywhere. So here's an example of some data from Moodle that shows who's accessing what content online. So again, in its own right, it's not meaningful. But if I start asking insightful questions, turning information, it is valuable. I suddenly discover that people aren't actually reading articles online, So how do I do it? How do I actually incentivize people to read it? I put questions about it. I make it clear to people that they need it to score well. So I use the data to derive my decision making. So what we're going to talk about is how do we manage data. We're going to talk about big data, what big data is. We're going to talk about databases. And then we're going to talk about open innovation. So this is a changing paradigm where rather than the organization, existing in isolation from the rest of the world and doing its innovation in secret, it actually opens up the innovation process to the outside world. So I hope we'll get through this in about 5 or 6 15-minute slots, and that you can actually look through on your own time. But I would recommend that you go through these slides before the MCQ test. Okay, so we have a hierarchy of information. So we have data, which is ones and zeros. So a list of the heights and weights of an entire class is just data. On its own, it doesn't mean anything. If I then add some context to it, it becomes information. So if I could actually say, what's the average weight of a student? Then if I actually, learn from that and create an insight, it becomes knowledge. So I know what the average weight of a student is. I know how many students can fit in an elevator. So I can actually put a sign on the elevator that says no more than X people in this elevator at any one time. And then the wisdom is that if there's too many people in the elevator, I don't get in. Okay, so the opening case coming from the Rainier textbook is worth reading. So this is an example of how people get insights from data. So in America, health insurance is a big thing because they don't have a public healthcare system like we have in Europe. So it's essential that you have health insurance. But the companies themselves will have to pay for that health insurance. So Caesars Entertainment's a casino company employs 65,000 people. So it's a huge employer, but it also covers the family members as well. So then they analysed the data, how people actually use medical services. They saw that people were going to emergency rooms for visits, and they were also seeing whether people were getting generic or branded drugs. So what they actually saw was that lots of people with minor medical emergencies were going to A&E rather than going to primary care, cheaper facilities, but like things like for getting a plaster or stitches, they were going to A&E and it was costing thousands, whereas if they went to their local GP or the equivalent in the US, it'd be much cheaper. So what they did was they did an information education campaign to remind people how expensive it was. Basically, each employee realises that the more profit the organisation makes, then in theory it should factor into higher wages for them. So they were able to actually shift 10,000 emergencies to less expensive alternatives at a cost saving of 4.5 million. So that's nothing compared with some of the stuff that's going on in Ireland at the moment. So we're using, in the health service, we're using data analysis to identify people who are in hospital that would be better off being treated at home. So far, a single project has identified 35,000 people who are in hospital that should actually be treated at home. So each of those people would have an average visit in hospital of 10 days. A hospital visit in Ireland costs about €1,000 a night. So we're talking about, a cost of 350 million euro if these people are in hospital. We get them home, we get a clinical intervention nurse that visits them in their house, changes their dressings, gives them the injections they need or whatever, the physiotherapy or whatever they need, and that costs about €200 a visit. So we're saving, 300 million euro just by a sophisticated use of analysis to identify, how we can improve treatment. And the outcomes are actually better for these people because they're out of hospital, they're at home, they have their family looking after them, they're not at risk of catching a superbug or whatever. So we have an improved service, better. So we could apply it to recruitment. We look at the analysis of where we recruit people from and we identify what are the factors that result in a high-performing person. We've product development, so we analyse data to see how people are actually using products. So if you think about operations, UPS, the courier company, has sensors and GPS in all their vehicles. So they upload all the data at the end of the day and they analyse it. And they actually discover that, by performing business analytics on the data, they were able to reduce fuel consumption by 8.4 million gallons. So that's 40,000 litres. So in Irish prices, that would be over 40 million euro. Gas is cheaper in the US, but it's around that. And they're able to cut 85 million miles off their routes. So that saves time, it's cheaper. They also identified the situations in which accidents happen. So they discovered that accidents happen when the truck is reversing or it's turning across a busy road. So they actually recalculated their routes to avoid that sort of thing. and as a result they will reduce the number of accidents. You can also use data analytics to identify when people are likely to be home in their houses. So if we know who we're delivering to, we know information about them, we can actually arrange the deliveries to arrive when people are there. And that's useful for marketing. We can learn, business analytics helps us to learn about customers, so we can tailor an offering for them. So this is a kind of a classic case. It's used over and over again in IT. It's Target, which is a clothing retailer in the United States. And this father contacts Target, and he's really, really angry because his daughter has received coupons for baby clothes and a mail order catalogue through the post. And he feels that they're trying to encourage her to get pregnant so they can sell her stuff. So he's really, really cross. But the reality is, what Target have is an analytic model based on people's purchase history, third-party data that they've bought off other people, and analysis of your basket. So even if you don't buy stuff off Target, but by clicking on it and putting it into the basket, they know you're interested in it. The website interaction. So what website have you been on beforehand? So if you've just been visiting a website about morning sickness or baby clothes, and then you go into Target, they've got a fair idea that you're possibly pregnant, and your demographic data. So neither myself nor Colin Meaney are going to get pregnant. Somebody over the age of 50 is unlikely to get pregnant. We have different things, so we can actually, we can estimate based on people's behaviour what the probability of them being pregnant are, and how pregnant not how pregnant you are or you aren't, how long pregnant they actually are. So they do this. They assign each customer a unique guest ID, and they're able to track and analyse behaviour across all the different platforms. So then they look at the baby registry database, and they see how people's behaviour has evolved. So there's 25 critical products which, purchased in combinations, identify whether a customer is pregnant and how far along they are in the process. So it turns out this gentleman talked to his daughter, certain things you can only keep secret for so long, and he makes the apology. He's delighted. He's going to be a grandfather, and he's able to purchase the stuff. But this basically is telling us, with business intelligence, we can know more about what's going on in people's lives and the people around them based on their behavioural data. So what we're going to talk about a little bit today is how do we actually manage that data. So that's the end of part 1. I'm going to upload that section to YouTube now, and then the next part we'll talk about the managing of data.